Welcome to another episode of Head to Head, where today we take a deep dive into the toilet bowls of Overwatch. We go face first to where no duo has gone before to figure out, is Boston Uprising the worst owl team of all time? It's a loaded question.
It definitely is.
They are rapidly approaching the conversation at a speed we have not seen in a very long time. What teams come to mind for you when you're thought about this?
The obvious one is the Shanghai Dragons of 2018, right? But that one's a little too easy. So I feel like
table that one.
we've got to kind of work our way down, right? Like we have to kind of find where Boston end up, because every team could be rated somewhere on the list of worst of all time. Like the San Francisco Shock would just be the least worst of all time. So Boston have got to be somewhere. But I think it's a matter of finding out where. Like, they're definitely the worst team this year, and it seems like by a long margin. It's been a while since we had a team that was
we
this
haven't
bad
seen
competitive
a team like
competition
in an incredibly long time. I mean, the Dragons come to mind, right? But I think we start with last year. I think right now Boston is clearly like the worst.
Yeah,
I mean, there's not really an argument for anybody else, like,
because the other thing is, like, Washington are 2-7 right now, and Boston are 1-8.
12 maps.
But exactly, all of their games, not all of them, but a lot of their games have been pretty close. Like, Washington had a homestand where they went 0-2, all right, but they actually had two pretty close games. They've been getting drubbed recently because they've been going up against the good teams. Boston beat Houston in the very first original toilet bowl that went to 5.
If everyone was that game right now, Houston would 3-0 them.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Houston was poo tier at the time.
They were. I think Houston got better. They also stopped getting ill. Like, they were really ill at the time.
If you took those maps away, obviously you can't do that. They've won, what, 4 maps?
I mean, how many did Boston even win in the middle of that? I think Boston won 2, right? And then they drew a couple or something. I don't know. That map was
2 maps.
That match was an absolute horrific display.
It's not looking good. So we can go to last season, right?
Yeah.
Last season, we can look through the league. There were a lot of lackluster performances, most notably the Florida Mayhem. This is where I think they submit their ticket into the dance. And a lot of people are like, hey, you didn't even get to season 1 Mayhem. Turns out season 2 Mayhem was worse.
I mean, how does that happen?
in a season 1 Mayhem won 41 maps, I believe. 42 maps. All right. They were 7-33.
7-33.
7-33.
Oh.
With a map score of 42 wins, 120 losses, and 5 draws.
Oh, man.
That is good for a -78.
Do you know what, though? You've got to applaud their incredible tenacity. Like, their incredible determination and tenacity to get out on that stage every time, knowing that they were going to lose. I mean, it's not even like the 2018 Shanghai Dragons where they had something to play for. They were searching for that elusive win. Right. Mayhem had already got a win, and it was just bleakness from there on out.
Yeah. I mean, the Dallas Fuel aren't out of the trenches in season 1. I mean, Dallas Fuel only wins 58 maps, but they win 12 games.
Yeah.
Season 1, you saw 3 teams break the 100 maps loss margin. So,
but also we were playing a lot more games back then as well, right? Like
40 games.
40 games. That's a huge amount.
Could you imagine watching some of the teams now playing 40 games?
I mean, season 1 was a drag. I saw a Reddit thread recently saying that season 1 was the best we've ever seen of Overwatch. I was like, man, the rose-tinted goggles coming out early this year. The observing was rough because people were starting to get a grip with how to observe properly. We had Mercy meta with people getting double reses all over the place. Everywhere. And then we had just shit teams getting trudged out repeatedly to be humiliated. There were great high points, don't get me wrong, but
it wasn't good.
Whoa, there was some rough points as well.
All right, season 2 though, the Mayhem get worse. They go from 42 map wins and 7 wins to 6 wins with only 36 maps played. Obviously less games played, but what, 26 out of 28. I mean, you kind of look at that over 40 games. I mean, they're not far off from where they were in season 1.
And also just the level of play improved.
Were they funnier to watch? Because I feel like a part of this that goes into it is a part when you watch like bad team play, and I think you start to rank bad teams. I think there's a fun factor that has to be determined into it. Like,
does that make them worse or better though? If it really is just a clown fiesta, does that make... It
makes them better? Yeah. They get more. I would give them more credit towards a better team if they provide me with some level of entertainment.
Okay.
When you just kind of roll out the corpses and they just get beat and then you roll right back in. I mean, that's not that fun.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you what, I think
Mayhem wasn't that fun though.
Season 2 Mayhem was not fun at all. Season 2 Toronto has got to be the worst because they went 8-20, which is the same as the Washington Justice and the Boston Uprising that year.
But didn't they have a 6-stage one though? Didn't they win?
They did. Yeah. Yeah, they did. How
many games did they win in stage 1?
I want to say...
They won 5.
Yeah, they went 5-2 in stage 1, I think.
So they won 1 game each stage for the remainder of the season.
It was disgusting. It was disgusting. But also, I mean, the thing was with watching them, there was no identity to the team.
Wait, hold on. This is actually kind of crazy, which is kind of cool to go look back on because we don't do this like really at the end of every season. Toronto won 5 games in stage 1. How many games they win in stage 2?
I want to say like 3.
2.
Okay.
So they won 1 game combined between stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3.
I believe there was 3 teams that did that. I think Toronto, Boston, and Dallas all only won 1 game at the end of in the whole of the second half.
Washington, dude, stage 3 last year. Boston, Dallas, and Florida all win 1 game each.
Yeah.
Washington and Toronto both get the goose egg.
Yeah.
Don't win a game. Toronto, I mean, good for Toronto. They win 4 maps. The Justice win 2 maps all stage. They draw 4. You're in a tough spot where you're drawing more maps than you're winning. I mean, it's like, but then the Justice just bounce out of a rocket in stage 4. So that's right. They saved themselves. Exempt.
But the thing was, I hated, more than any team I've ever watched ever, I hated watching last year's Washington Justice. I called them the entertainment thieves. They would just roll up to a game, they wouldn't attack, they would just sit there behind Janice's big old Reinhardt shield, and they would just wait to die. And that's why they had so many draws, is that they would just not do anything, but they would just sit there and they wouldn't really make that many mistakes. They just wouldn't do anything. So of course they're going to lose eventually. But it was appalling, Matt. Like, if I could erase a team from history, it would be the Washington Justice before stage 4 of last year. I would let them stay for stage 4. But yeah, I would rather take my eyeballs open. Take my eyeballs open, Matt. I would rather watch Boston this year or Shanghai in 2018 than 2019 Justice. That's
also where the fun factor comes in, right?
Yeah, sure. Shanghai get bonus points for that, by the way. 2018 Shanghai get bonus points.
Who did the hell did Toronto beat in stage 4? Because I feel like they auto get put in.
Probably just the teams that were literally getting no wins, like Dallas and Boston and Florida.
I like that. I like the Toronto roster. I liked all the guys on that roster. They're cool.
The people were fun, but they started with a full Korean team, and then they just ditched everybody halfway through. Like, at least Boston this year, if we're going to tie it back to our original thesis, at least Boston have Jerry, who you can root for, or be like, hey, Jerry should be on a better team. There's some story there. With Toronto, they started with a full Korean roster, and then they just got rid of all the Koreans, and then they just added a bunch of random people from tier 2 to the point where it just seemed like they were shipping people out. They were just trying to find the dregs and push them out there. And I love those guys. But
last year, I'm 37 in stage 1, was hyped to be the next coming, and we were talking about Roki is up and coming support, and
don't remind me of the things we said. Don't remind me of the things we said. Who
do you think Toronto beat in stage 4 with that 1 win?
What, you're getting me to guess? I reckon it was
a 2-1.
It was a 2-1 win. It was probably over Florida.
It was over the
Oh no, Florida got better actually. Florida got better.
It was over the stage 3 champion Shanghai Dragons 2-1.
No, it wasn't. Toronto beat Shanghai. Oh my god, Toronto, what happened last year?
Listen to this stretch of games. Toronto gets 4-0 by New York to end stage 3. They open up stage 4 with a loss to Washington, end a loss to London, and then they 2-1 Shanghai, and then they lose a game 5 to Philly. Like,
I mean, I had given up at that point because Toronto just couldn't make the playoffs anyway, so I just mentally checked out of all of their games. Good goddamn.
What I think makes Boston special this year is that like their roster just doesn't have a ton of pieces. Where like a lot of the other teams like that we've listed have tried to make a ton of changes or like sub people in and try different stuff.
Oh yeah, that was one of the amazing things about Shanghai in the first season was that it really was 2 different rosters. It wasn't really one roster that failed. It was 2. They fielded 2 rosters and neither of them could get a win. That's appalling. That's a travesty.
There's no bueno. Boston, though, I feel bad for the players. You only have 6 players. So, like, if you're not good at something, what do you do? There's not really an option.
Yeah. I mean, at some point, the league is surely going to be coming knocking on their doors as well, because you're supposed to have 8 to be eligible. But, you know, COVID situation, so I think they're getting a free pass at the moment.
You can't really kind of take it out of them. I think...
It wouldn't make a difference, Matt, their ending win rate.
It wouldn't make a difference. I actually think the best part about season 1 Shanghai is some of like the hilarious stuff that happened before. Like I remember when we were doing like interviews with teams before the season.
Yeah.
And this is 2 years old, so we can talk about it. And it was like, hey, so we looked at your guys' roster and you don't have a flex support. You picked up like 3 Lucio players. And they were like, oh yeah, we're confident that they'll be able to figure it out. And then it was like, all right. And then it was like, hey, all your DPS players are just like McCree one tricks. like, do you guys have like a projectile or something? They're like, yeah, they can learn, they can play anything. And then like it seemed forever the strategy was just play Roshan on Winston and just see if Undead could just kill a ton of people before Roshan hit the ground, and it didn't work.
God, yeah.
I reckon if they had Fearless, Otto, and Gegri at the beginning of the season, they would have won a game. Season 1.
I agree with that as well. I think that that's true.
They would have won a game. If they had those 3 players, they would have won a game.
I think whenever you're thinking about like worst teams of all time, I'm just going to come out and say it. That beginning roster of the Shanghai Dragons is just pure
They may take the cake.
level.
I mean, there's not the opening. What was it? We had to go back and look.
Yeah, so I've got it here, this opening roster. So this was stage 1, week 1, day 3. So I believe this is the first time they played, but they might have already squeaked in a game before this. This is, Matt, remember how great this roster was. Some legendary players that will go down in all time. Roshan and Zushu on the tank line. Roshan, an absolute legend.
Dude. Remember when, what was it? Tyrone thought the MG was going to be like a... Whatever happened to MG?
Well, MG was subbed in like halfway through the season or something, and then I don't know, he's disappeared. Just that's the thing. It really did kill all of these guys' careers because they didn't even get a chance to be able to learn. They put too many bad players together when some of them might have had potential on their own.
Well, that's where I think you kind of the roster you feel bad about it because like the players had like individual skill. They were horrible together. I mean, they were just horrible together.
Oh, absolutely, and like a failure of the coaching staff as well. They had no clue what they were doing. They massively underestimated the amount of coordination I think that you needed in the Overwatch League, and they just
well, nobody knew what was going to happen once you got all these top teams together.
Yeah.
In one league, so nobody knew how it was going to act. Where it just kind of spiraled away from our poor little season 1 Dragons.
Anyway, this was the roster, Matt. This was the roster. Roshan and Zushu, and then on DPS you had Dia and Undead. And Undead was just desperate to try and carry this team on McCree whenever he could.
I remember, I think it was like one of the first few times I casted Shanghai, and it was a Hanamura game, and I knew they were fucked the rest of the way just from what I was watching. Like, so they would have Roshan and Zushu go in, just get through the door, Winston Diva any way possible, and then the observers would pan over and you would see Free Feel on the Zen, and you'd have like Altering on Mercy. Both like the Harmony Orb in the Mercy Beam is into Undead.
Yeah.
And he's just standing at the gate, popping off.
Yeah.
And it didn't happen.
No, it never happened.
Nothing
It never
happened.
worked. And Roshan died every single time and just looked dreadful because of it. Have you ever gone back and watched those games, like with the knowledge of like how Overwatch should be played now? If you go back and watch
a review,
dude, if you go back and watch any 2018 game, and maybe not any game, but the majority of them, it's abominable. The level of play is so poor.
Is that why Boston this year is so surprising? Because the level of play has risen, and I believe these players like individually are significantly better than the players we saw in season one.
Jerry's genuinely good, and Colorhex is also a genuinely good player. And then they've got like Myeonbong, who's been really good in contenders as well.
Yeah.
Fusions has had some success at the OWL level too. This team, I think would beat the shit out of 2018 Shanghai. Honestly, they beat the piss out of them. I really think that. The first roster. The second one, like the one that was later on that had like, who did that even have?
It was Sky, 5 King on the Lucio.
Fearless, MG, Ado Damon, these kind of people.
Ado Damon, Geggery. I think that would be a close game.
I think that could be close, yeah.
I think we'd have to go down another rabbit hole to find a team worse than the initial Shanghai.
Oh yeah, I mean you're plumbing the depths of contenders at that point, because I don't think there's ever been an OWL level team that was similar. But I think the Boston Uprising now are they've been. The problem is everyone made significant upgrades in the off season. There was all of this talk in this season about a lot of teams taking it cheap, but the only two teams that really took it cheap, as far as I can tell, are Boston and the Valiant. And Valiant scouting was really good. So they've actually ended up doing well. And okay, that isn't reflected in their win rate at the moment. Yeah. But actually, in terms of their performance, you can tell that this is a competent team. They're not getting the piss beaten out of them by Florida Mayhem, just getting pummeled on the regular.
Is there a way Boston can turn this around and we have a new nominee for this year? Because there are a lot of teams in the 2 to 3 win zone.
I think, all right, here's what needs to happen for Boston.
We can see somebody just get pumped.
Oh, you mean someone else gets worse?
Yeah. Is there a world in which somebody else gets like significantly worse with the conferences now?
The only way that I can see that happen,
because I do think Boston can find some wins against some of these teams if they continue to struggle.
Yes, I think that I could see a world in which like the meta changes. The thing is, I always say the meta changes, but if you actually look at the Boston Uprising, changing. Well, yeah, the meta itself isn't changing that often.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's the new every map matters.
But the Color Hex has just been stuck on May, and Color Hex is like a Genji, Pharah, Widowmaker kind of player. So until you can get him on a role that he's good at, this team will continue to be the worst in the league, I think. And even when you do have him on a role that he's good at, so like let's imagine it was a Widow Hanzo, let's say, because Jerry's really good at the Hanzo, Color Hex is good there.
Games that week.
But the problem is, if they're on Widow Hanzo, that means all the rest of the league is on Widow Hanzo. And I can't really think of another team that would suck at Widow Hanzo. Like, maybe Houston, because they don't really have 2 sniper players.
But even then, I don't feel great about it.
Yeah, and like Justice are going to dominate in a double sniper, probably. Is
there a way that like a Chengdu or a Guangzhou gets like banished to the Shadow Realm in the Asia region? Like they just get
what about London?
Destroyed.
London, to me, is the only candidate for having like a win rate that's anywhere near Boston's by the end of the season. Because if they stay in the Asian region, they look like the worst team in the Asian region. And they're like, they're all right. The London Spitfire are somewhere between Florida Mayhem and the Washington Justice. Like, they're in that, like, all right to kind of poor level.
They're on the brink.
But they're no Boston. I mean, the more that we talk here, Matt, the more I'm convincing myself that no, the Boston Uprising just simply do not have a chance this year unless they add more personnel to their roster. Like, that's the big problem here for Boston.
If they had a May player, I think they'd be fine.
I mean, they've also just got... They've got very mediocre players everywhere apart from Jerry. And arguably Myeonbong, but he's not in a position to shine because the rest of his team is pretty mediocre.
But maybe they grow. Is
there a worse tank line in the league than Boston's? As harsh as that seems to say about Fusion. Maybe maybe Toronto's, but they've got Note, who I would take. Sorry, not Note. They've got Nevix, who I would take over Brusen. Like, I don't know. Maybe Gig McGravy, but even that, I would take Gig McGravy over Fusion's Brusen.
Yeah.
So they got
Eamon Elsa. I don't know.
I mean, Eamon Elsa though, they get the job done on comps that suit them. Whereas what comp suits Fusion's Brusen? Like Ryan Sigma?
No, Ryan Sigma. Yeah, we haven't really seen them have a chance to play that.
Yep, no idea though. The fact that this roster only has 6 players, and the rest of the league has improved around them so much, and they have mediocre players at most of their positions.
It's a little bit of a perfect storm.
It really is.
But I
don't see a way out.
I can see them getting a win against like the Justice in an off chance week, or
do you?
I could. Dude, the Justice aren't that far off.
The Justice have at least played other teams close. Matt, I don't know whether you saw
the Justice have 12 map wins.
Yeah. How many map wins does Boston Uprising have at the moment? 7. That's not good.
And Boston's played one less series. So let's say if Boston were to win a series, they're actually almost like tied.
Yeah, if they win 5 maps in a series, what are we playing here? Best of 9.
They're almost. I said they're almost tied. I didn't say they are tied. They're close to being tied.
But Matt, tell me this: do they look in their most recent performances like a team that's going to be getting wins anytime soon? I don't think so. I think this team is just like it's weird, right?
Trick you, dog.
Every other year, it's looked like there were 2 teams at the bottom, at least, sometimes 3. This year, there's really only 1 right now. And like, there's a big gap between them and the rest. It is like a 2018 situation where every time the Florida Mayhem rolled up, you were like, all right, they're going to get slammed, except for when they play against Shanghai. There isn't a Shanghai level team for Boston to roll over.
I do think, though, Boston has the advantage of the Atlantic Division, though. Like, there are a lot of the weaker teams in the Atlantic. True. But even still, I don't know where you see them kind of finding games.
All right, let's answer this question. We don't believe that the Boston Uprising are worse than the Shanghai Dragons of 2018, right? That would take something truly incredible to occur. But are they worse than the Florida Mayhem of 2018?
I will say that I think that, I don't think they're worse than the Dragons. I mean, look, the Dragons in year 1, they put up a historic pace. 6 map wins in stage 1.
Yeah.
This is going to hurt to say. 2 map wins in 10 games in stage 2.
Bruh.
And only 1 draw, so they weren't even getting draws. Like, I mean, 2 and 37.
Yeah.
They do make a big improvement, though, in stage 3, where they win 9 maps. Obviously, they don't win a game, but they win as many maps as the Dallas Fuel, who are right above them.
But again, that was their like new roster, right? By the time we get to this point,
and then they come back down to earth and they win 4 games in stage 4.
Do you think
the pressure was on them?
Do you think the Boston Uprising right now are better than the Florida Mayhem of season 1 with like Zebasai and Zupe and those kind of people?
Well, I think we need to answer the lingering question: is which Florida Mayhem gets entered into the ring here? Is it year 1 Florida Mayhem or is it year 2?
Dude,
because if you're going off of the record and you're basing it off of that. Florida Mayhem year 1 was 7-33 with 42 maps won. Obviously, map count is way different because of the length of the season, etc. But I mean, they win 6 games last year, 22 losses. The lowest map count they go with 36 maps.
I'll tell you this, Matt.
And they go negative 39 in the map differential, where year 1 they go. Oh, I mean, here when they go negative 78.
Matt, they'd get destroyed, I think. And that is my timer to tell us that we have just reached the amount of time discussing how bad the Boston Uprising is as the amount of time that they spent getting absolutely spawn camped by the Florida Mayhem recently. So, time's up, I guess.
Yeah, time's up. We'll never know.
We'll never know.